What's up, kids? It's your old Uncle Shawn. That was weird. We are checking out the Friedman BE100 Deluxe. This is the flagship amplifier from Friedman. I was really excited when they said they were going to send this guy out for me to demo, because I've only played one Friedman amplifier my whole entire life, and it's my my DS40, my Dirty Shirley 40, and I really dig that amp. This thing is a beast. I was so excited to check it out. It totally delivered. What this guy is it's a 100-watt EL34 powered amp, so it's just got tons of headroom, sounds huge, but you can play it at bedroom levels, and we'll get into that in the demo. It's a 3-channel amplifier, so you have your clean channel. I'll say that in parentheses because it can be pristine clean. It's based on a plexi. But if you dime it, you're going to get AC/DC territory with absolutely no problems whatsoever. That channel has a bass, mid, and treble control with its own gain and volume, and it has a 3-way bright switch. We'll get into how that sounds. Now, there's 2 more channels. You're going to get the BE and HBE channels. Now, those channels are going to share the same bass, mid, and treb, but they do have their own gain and masters, which is really cool, super dialable. Now you can see right here, there's a voice switch. That voice switch only affects those 2 channels. We'll get into how that sounds in the demo. And then over on the on this side of the amplifier is your power section controls. So you're going to get a presence control, does what you think it will. A thump control adds thump. And system volume adds, that's your overall or global volume, and that thing works really, really well. I really like how that sounds. And I don't mean to just say thump is thump and presence is presence. There's more to these because you do have a response switch and a frequency switch. Both of these are 3-way switches that definitely affect the power section, how the presence and thump respond. So we'll definitely get into that in the demo. On the back of the amplifier, you've got 5 switches. The first switch is going to be your fat switch for the plexi channel. We'll get into how that sounds. The second switch is going to be your fat switch for the BE and HBE channels. We'll get into that. It sounds killer. The third switch is the C45 switch. And I think that's based on mods that David has done on other amplifiers. It just adds more of a vintage element to the tone of this amplifier. There's a 4th switch, which is a SAT switch, which changes the saturation of the amp. And then the 5th switch is the switch that I used the most with this amplifier. It's the overall gain structure switch. And I've seen that switch on other amps that Dave has built, and it really works great. Now for me, and Dave knows this as well, I tend to lean towards lower gain tones, more vintage, or if it is high gain, it tends to be more of a vintage high gain tone. So I leaned on that gain structure switch. I kept it in what would be considered in between really vintage and maybe higher gain, and we'll get into that in the demo as well. But I really wanted to focus more on the medium gain to maybe medium high gain tones that this amp is capable of, because that's really where my world is. There's obviously your speaker outs back there. You can obviously choose you know, your impedance and all that stuff. The effects loop sounds killer on it. I'm not going to demo that, but take my word for it. It's, you know, it's spot on. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to start making some racket for you. Okay, so we are checking out the clean channel, the plexi channel on the BE100 Deluxe. Now it's considered the clean channel, but you can drag it into more AC/DC territory without too much trouble at all. Right now it's somewhat clean. There's a little bit of breakup there. We can turn it up a little bit on the neck position. get some breakup, but if you were to turn it all the way up and hit it with, say, a back humbucker that's going to be hotter, now you're into AC/DC territory. Now, without touching anything, if you want it to get a little fatter, there's a fat switch on the back of the amp for this channel, so check it out. Sounds really big. There's a low mid presence there, but it's not overwhelming. And I think in the performance track, when I did the Telecaster, I did use the fat switch, but on the Stratocaster playing the opening riff, I turned the fat switch off. I think in this case, I just leave it on all the time. It just sounds, it sounds huge. Now, if you want this channel to be really clean, we can turn down the gain and turn up the volume. And it's really clean. Now, if we want that to brighten up, you do have a bright switch, and right now it's to the left. What I'm going to do is put it in the neutral position. It's darker. If you put it to the left, it's going to be a little brighter. If you put it all the way to the right, it's going to be the brightest. So if you want really pristine, clean, kind of chimey, clean tones, it's no problem with this amp because it's got the headroom for it, as well as the proper voicing. So that is the Plexi channel. Let's go ahead and bump over to the BE channel. And right now, the way I have it dialed, you're not going to hear as much gain. Even with the gain set at like 8, it's not going to be super high gain because I'm focusing a little bit more on the vintage tones of this amplifier, because that's what I'm drawn to, is maybe lower gain tones. But I will show you the higher gain stuff as well. But right now, so right now, to me, that sounds killer. Let's look at the voice switch. So what that's doing is kind of cutting or shelving top end. So in the center, that's going to be wide open. To the left, a little darker. To the right, even darker. So that's pretty dark, but if you wanted more top end, you could crank the treble. And what you're getting is just a different type of top end. You could turn up the presence. And that sounds killer, or maybe you actually do want it to just sound darker, more kind of vintage, you know, darker. For me, I liked it in the center with the treble backed off just a little bit. I thought that sounded great, even with the bass all the way up. The mids are on about 4, and I love what Dave says about mids. If you actually want the audience to hear you, turn the mids up. So mids all the way up. Mids all the way down, it will scoop. I like them, you know, maybe around 5. I think that sounds really good. Now, we'll get to the gain thing really quick. The gain all the way up. With the gain set that way, that's not the highest amount of gain that channel is capable of, but we'll get to that in a second. There's a switch on the back as well that will fatten up that channel. I'm going to turn down the gain a little bit. Does the same as it did on the Plexi, but now we're doing this for the BE and the HBE channels. So just add some fatness in those low mids. You could roll off the bass a little bit. And And that just sounds huge. Now what I want to focus on is the next switch on the back, which is it's a vintage type of, I think it's a mod that Dave did called the C45 switch. And it only seems to affect the BE and HBE channels. This is the mode I use the amp in the most. Because it just had this vintage bark. But there, yeah, there's just a growl there. It felt more vintage to me. So I really dug that. Now let's check out gain without messing around with the actual gain control. Right now, the gain structure switch is up, all the way up in the back. If I put it all the way down, you're going to get a lot more gain. On both channels. Now check it out. If I put it in the center, less gain. If I put it in the up position, which is where I like it the best, you're going to get a little bit more gain and a little bit more top end. But to me, that's the perfect, like, vintage high gain type of tone. Because my world really does kind of sit in that moderate gain. I don't play a lot of high gain. Every once in a while I will, and this amp's perfectly capable of that. But this is more my world. Now what I want to do is throw it to the HBE channel without touching anything. Now that channel's got quite a bit on tap, and we're not in the high gain setting. We're basically gain structure wise in between the lower and the higher gains. Now I do still have the fat switch on if we wanted that to be a little bit less broad in the lower mids. So that channel's got quite a bit more gain. That's what I used for the solo sounds. Just sounds and feels great. What I'm going to do is bump back to, let's go back to the BE channel. A little less gain. And let's talk about the presence, thump, and system volume. You've obviously got a volume for your clean, and then you have a separate master for your BE and HBE channels that share the same EQ, but you do have separate gains. The first thing I want to focus on is once you get all this dialed in, having a system volume is awesome because you can just turn up or down without having to reach and turn all three levels up or down. So I'm just going to turn down the system volume. And I really like the way the system volume sounds. I'm less apt to turn down channel masters. I think the amp sounds more open when you can get the channel masters around, you know, between 6 and maybe 8. Way rather turn down the system volume. And we can get really soft. And then for me with the system volume, if you want to kind of get it out of the loop or mix per se, around 6, between 5 and 6 will get you there. But it is really loud, but good Lord. That tone. Now, I'm going to turn it back down and let's talk about the thump control really quick. Because if you do have it turned down, but you're missing the sympathetics of low end, gives you that 4x12 thing that you may not be getting out of your 1x12 at low volume. I'm going to turn back up and show you the frequency. So that's to the left, center, to the right. Now to the right, that seems to be the most extreme. In the middle, there's more of almost a low mid presence, maybe a little bit less thump. I really like it there. And then to the left. So you have to tune to the room, your cabinet, your volume, whatever you're using. Presence. Right now, the switch is all the way to the right. I'm going to put the switch in the center, and that's going to be your most open setting. To the right, it's going to be darker. To the left, even darker. So once again, it depends on what guitar you're using, what cabinet, what room are you in. Very, very musical. I like it to the right, and then you can adjust accordingly. So this amp is incredibly versatile. There's tons of interaction between your presence control and your treb controls, your thump control and your bass controls, your system volume and your master controls. The vintage settings on the back, or I should say the gain structure settings on the back, the C45 setting on the back, the fat switches. There's just all kinds of tones in this amplifier. I didn't struggle to figure this amp out. I mean, I always kind of giggle at the guy that says, I don't like an amp that has a lot of knobs and switches on it. And at the same time, when you look at his pedal board, it's like the size of Austin, Texas. At the end of the day, it's like, this amp is really well thought out, really well voiced. Thanks for watching, you guys.